thank you for joining me. Today I'm going to show you how I do a watercolor background in a Hanna Karlzon book. Now I want to specify that I've only tried this in the Hanna Karlzon books, and they do have really good paper. I definitely would not try this in an Amazon KDP book, a self-printed by Amazon book, or any of the thinner papers. It may very well work quite well in a Maria Troller book or one of those. But before I do the actual watercolor background, I need to prepare the image. I like to do an image that is fairly simple so that the background stands out. I just want to... So I find these kinds of images easier to work with than, for instance, one of these more detailed images, because there's just too much. This would be a nice one as well, but I've decided to do, I think I'm going to do this one on the right-hand side. I also, strangely enough, like working on the right-hand side of the page. So before one starts painting, you need to block out the image. And to do that, I use a masking fluid. I have two here. One, this is a South African brand, Dala masking fluid. And the other is in a sort of a pen. It's a Schminke masking fluid, and then I'm going to show you how I apply them. So this one works quite well. I'm just going to give it a bit of a shake, and I'm not going to do the whole thing on camera. I just want to show you a little bit because there are quite a few videos around showing how to do this kind of thing. One shouldn't put it on too thickly. And just a warning that it messes your paintbrushes up very badly. So it's best not to use a paintbrush to apply it, or if you do use a paintbrush, which I'm going to do, I'll show you something to do, but it's also going to be a paintbrush that I keep specifically for masking fluid. So if you happen to have one of these types of pens, it makes life quite a lot easier. And I think I'm going to do this outline with this one. And the reason one's doing this is because you rub this off once you're finished, and I'll show you how to do that. I also want to let you know that one mustn't leave the masking fluid on for more than, I would say, 24 hours. Better to be done with your painting within the 24 hours so that you can remove it, because it becomes fiendishly difficult to get off after that time. What masking fluid essentially is a kind of rubber cement, and it seals off the image so that your image is untouched underneath once you've finished, and the watercolor won't go on it at all. Because I then don't want to have to, one could paint around, but not with this particular wet on wet method that I'm going to demonstrate for you. So I'm going to do the rest of this off camera. I'll just show you how I apply it with a paintbrush in a minute or two. So there are two other ways of applying masking fluid if you don't have a nice kind of pen one like that. And I don't want to use all of this up because this is a large image to cover. So I'm going to pour some out. This is quite an inexpensive masking fluid. It's got a bit of an odor. And then one can use these silicone pens. This is by Ranger, and it's a silicone pen, and you can just dip it in here, and it works very much like a paintbrush. So you just paint it on like that. It's hard to tell how much is going on with this though. This comes with other shapes as well. And the thing is, once it's dried on here, you just rub it off the silicone, I mean. So you can, I hope I'm not removing it all together. I don't think so. It would be nice if it was a different color. And another, I'm going to leave that to dry to show you. And then the other one is to use your paintbrush. And I have here an old paintbrush that I don't like. So I've wet it and I've got some paintbrush soap. And I'm just, this is the Master's brush cleaner. You could use any sort of hand soap, I think, because this brush is a little bit dirty. So I just actually need to clean it beforehand and get the brush cleaner clean. And now I'm just covering it with the soap, which will put a little bit of a protective layer on the brush. And then I'm basically going to mark this brush with some washi tape or something so that I know this is my masking fluid brush. So I have some washi tape here. And I'm going to wrap some around the top of the brush so that I can find this particular brush. And then I'm just going to paint with it, with this. And that's Goodbye Brush. But that goes on nice and quickly and easily. So that's shown you how to do this, and I'm going to do the rest of this off camera. So I've put on all the masking fluid and I'm going to seal the little bit I poured out. And interestingly enough, my brush washed fairly clean, having put the soap on first. So I will still be keeping that simply as a masking fluid brush. These two things, I'm waiting for the masking fluid to dry, and then I'm just going to peel it off. So I found applying it with the brush actually the easiest. Trying to check I've got it everywhere, sort of shining. It's easier to see the blue one, but I didn't want to use all the schminke up. And once that is dry, I will be back and I'll get on with the watercolors. There are some preparations we have to do before we start. We're going to need some plastic sheets. So I need to protect this page here. And I'm going to use masking tape to mask it down with. And then we also need to protect the page beneath. And what I do find happens when I use this is that the top of this backing page can often get, the paint will sort of seep over. So I put masking tape all around that backing page. And if you're not used to working with watercolors, masking tape can sometimes actually pull up the paper when you lift it. So I always stick it down on something, my clothing or whatever, a few times, before I stick it on the paper, so that you can see it's quite dirty. Well, you'll see when it's on here, so that it tends to lift a little bit more easily. I hope that that's going down properly. And another piece. And then another trick to remember when you're lifting your masking tape is if you happen to be a crafter and have a heat tool, that works very well. If you're like me and you don't, then use your electric hairdryer and just with the heat setting on, blow the heat onto the masking tape for a little bit before lifting it, and it comes up quite easily without breaking the paper, without ripping that paper up underneath it. So I'm just trying to make sure that the other pages are protected. So I'm sorry about the lighting shining. Let me turn it off there so long. So I've put this is just a one of those sheets that you put paper in, but any sort of plastic. I've put at the back page, I have masking tape all around the back page. This is the page we're going to paint, and I need to mask the facing page so that we don't get dirt on that, so we don't get water on that. So I'm just going to do that now. So now we're basically prepared, and then I have my paints. I've chosen a color palette. I'm going to put it up here, and I'll show you. It's from the Sarah Renee Clark Color Choices. It's not the block, it's the other one. I've got an empty palette here that I'm going to be mixing the colors in. As well as the plastic sheet, I'm putting a piece of paper here because I want to put my palette down here so that it's close by. I have 2 jars of water that I'm going to be using. I have paper towel close by, quite a few sheets actually, and I have a flat brush that I'm going to be using. I just need to put this other light on again so that you guys can see properly. Sorry if there's a little bit of a shine, not quite sure what to do about that. And then I will be using, I'm not quite sure, possibly this big round brush, otherwise, which is a large size 16, otherwise I'll be using my size 8. As I get going, I will decide what I need as I work. So I'm all set up there, and I've decided to do mostly a blue background, so shades of blue and teal. And I'm going to not speak as I do this. I'm going to do a voiceover because as I'm concentrating, I find I can't talk and I don't want to mess it up. So first though is to get the puddles of paint into my palette. So I just need, get all nervous when I do the video, so everything falls everywhere. So let me put my brushes on this side to prepare this. Want some indigo. It's the wrong way around. Look at the paint in the water. I absolutely love that. So I'm going to make quite a runny mixture of that, and then I will use some directly from the palette as well. Going to just make sure my core indigo is wet as well. The first one is a Lucan's indigo. Then I've got a nice pale cerulean blue, which is a Sennelier paint. So I wanted the contrast. This is Core Cobalt Teal. So now we're finally ready with the paints, and I'm just using a layer of completely clean water on my flat brush, and I'm putting that onto the page. I'm just going over the masked area, and it just sort of beads up on there and should not be going through to the image at all. I do hope I have the masking fluid on well enough, and I'm trying to wet the page quite well. If this was watercolor paper, it would not sit on top of the paper quite as much. It would soak in differently, but I wanted this water there, and now I'm just painting stripes of paint down over the water. I want it to run, and I want different colors, and I'm working as quickly as I can because I don't want the page to dry out. So I feel like I need to get some darker paint down, but this is going to be a first layer, and I'll let this dry and then put another layer down. I feel a bit as I'm painting this that I'm not getting enough contrast, but I do want it to be fast enough, and I'll put the darker paint down later. And I'm actually using my large brush and just painting. I stretched the masking tape, and you can see it's kind of bubbling where the paper has got wet, but I'm just leaving it there because one cannot deal too much with anything when the paper's wet. It's very unstable. So now I'm putting the darker pigment down, and I just want it to blend. And now I want to let some of this paint run a bit, so I'm lifting the book up. It's all a bit awkward trying to get it all on camera. I hope that you guys can see everything, and I'm using my paper towel just to catch drips as they go down, and hoping that it's not destroying the under pages. So I just wanted it to drip a little bit, and now I need to leave this to dry completely before I go on and do another layer. That is very, very important, that it must dry absolutely completely. So it's now all completely dry, and we're going to do the next layer. I just wanted to check the page behind, and that seems to be fine. So now I want to use more concentrated color. The paint is also dried in the palette, so it's not as dilute as it was. And I'm just wetting it, but not putting quite as much water in. My cerulean blue is just about finished, so I need to get that going again. And then I'm going to start painting. So now I just want to spray the palette and get the watercolors activated there, and I'm giving a quick spritz onto the page itself so that it's not completely, I want the water to move a little bit, and I'm going on like that. I'm not using clean water again, but as I start to do that, I decide it's not moving enough, so I come back with my flat brush and I do another layer of clean water over the water that's there. Now you may find this strange having left it to dry, but it doesn't lift up what's underneath. You've got to work fairly quickly again. If you scrub on the paper, it will move it, but I'm just putting the layer of water down, and then I'm going to repeat almost exactly what I did previously, but just try to get more pigment down so that there's more contrast in the colors. I'm going directly from my palette with this deep indigo. I love that color and I feel it makes a statement, and I want to get it in different places. I want this to look very unplanned. I don't want it to be a careful, I don't know how to explain what's in my mind, but I want the water, I want the paint and the water to mingle and it to be very definitely a watercolor background. And I'm hoping to sort of create textures with all the paints going in and out in the different colors. And I hope because they're wet that they will mingle a little bit. There is some pooling there and I want this to run again. So I'm lifting it, trying to catch it as it comes down. It's going into the binding of the book a little bit, and that's got me slightly concerned. But I love the drips coming down. So I'm quite liking what's happening there. And now I'm giving it a spritz too, because I wanted the one on the right to move a little bit more. And I just watch it and let it play and do its thing. I'm getting a bit of an edge on the right side and I don't like that, so I'm using the paintbrush just to move that paint. If that's something that you like, you could leave it. There, in my opinion, there is no right and wrong. It's purely about what pleases your eye and your soul as you looking at this and playing. So I've got some puddles there and I just quickly using my paper towel to soak up a little bit of that water, and I think that that is sort of okay. And now I want to add more texture, and so I'm going to sprinkle just some ordinary table salt onto the top of this while it is wet, and then that will create textures as well. I've got my table salt in this little container that I use this particular salt for painting, so I'm just sprinkling that on. I'm not entirely sure that I've got enough contrast on the page. I hope that I have. And the thing with the table salt is that it pulls the pigment towards it and it creates little different effects as well. But it has to also dry completely. So now the thing is to just leave that completely and leave it to dry. I really must stop fiddling right now. I have decided though that I really do need more contrast, so I'm doing something that you shouldn't really do and putting more paint down on top of the salt. I hope it doesn't wreck the effects of the salt, but I want those dark contrast lines to be here and there. So just going to add a bit of those and then possibly a bit of salt. I'm trying to avoid the places where I've got the salt. As you can see, I'm actually using my slightly smaller brush for this second layer. I used the bigger brush for the first layer. I just want to make sure that all the white of the paper is covered. And then once I'm happy, I will just leave it to dry overnight. Okay, now, so everything has dried. I've removed most of the salt. I remove it with a soft brush. It's a makeup brush, the same one that I use for removing crayon the little scrapings that come off crayons, and then some places they were difficult and I used a harder nail brush to take the salt off. And now I just wanted to show you, I'm using, this is called Best Test Pickup Rubber Cement Eraser. You can use a normal eraser, it's quite difficult to get the masking fluid up with it. I find this works best. You can also just roll it with your finger. This gets it started though. So I found that the blue masking fluid, I didn't apply properly in places, so there are little bits of blue paint that have come through, but I'm sure I can cover that up with pencil. So I'm using that, and then basically it peels off like, I don't know what, like skin after you've been sunburned. Don't know if any of you that are younger ever got sunburned like we got sunburned in our youth. So I'm going to do this offline. It takes a little bit of time, and I'll be back with you to show you how it turned out. Okay, so here we have the completed background. I missed some places when I was using the masking fluid. I do find when I'm filming things, I find it quite difficult because I normally get my head right down next to things. And so I didn't do that the last time when I did this just for myself. But I'm quite happy with how it turned out. I like the textures the salt gave. I didn't use that last time. I could have used more of the dark, but I didn't want it to be exactly the same as the brown one I did. So I'm kind of quite happy with how this turned out. And I'm not going to do a watercolor on this side. I think I'll do something to match the colors, or I'm going to go cold colors, warm colors with these two images. I haven't quite decided. I used my hairdryer and the masking tape came off really nicely. The page is not bad at all. You can hear it's got a bit of a sound. Once it's lain flat for a while, it will be fine. Some paint seeped through, so I didn't seal off this little area well enough. So I'm going to have to do something. Let's see other pages. It hasn't gone further in the book. It has gone a little bit through there. You can see it's gone into the binding a little bit. So I think I should have actually put the masking tape over the binding and around the back. If you do it, I would do that. But the paper itself has withstood. Well, it doesn't feel brittle. It feels a little bit harder than the other paper. But I'm hoping by the end of this month, this will be, there's still a bit of masking fluid. This will be one of my completed pages, and you can see what it looks like then. I hope that this video has been useful to you and given you an idea. I will say that this is a quick background in as much as the actual painting is quick. The preparing of the image with masking fluid is time consuming and finicky. The removing of the masking fluid is time consuming, messy and finicky. The preparing of your image and your book so that you don't destroy it is time consuming and finicky, and a little bit nerve-wracking removing the masking tape because it often rips paper. So I cannot reiterate strongly enough to use a heat tool or hairdryer to slowly remove the masking tape. The waiting for the drying time between the applying the masking fluid, first coat of watercolor, second coat of watercolor, also takes time. So far this has taken me 24 hours. Still feeling some salt there. I keep coming in with my brush. So that's the lowdown on how I do this, and I hope it's been helpful and useful to you. Thank you very much for watching, and I wish you a wonderful, creative, and happy week. Bye-bye now.